Welcome to the latest Seahawks Draft Blog live stream, instant reaction pod, the final one of the season officially now, because the Seahawks have lost to the San Francisco 49ers in a game where they started very poorly. And I was sitting there thinking, fellas, this is going to be a long night. And then all of a sudden they decided to make a game of it. And at halftime, I'm thinking this could be an amazing night. And then the San Francisco 49ers started the second half and went on a 25-0 scoring run. And that was that. There is so much, I feel, to discuss from this, to take away from this game. But Robbie, what was your thought on what we've just seen?
Yeah, well, I mean, it was a fairly predictable outcome, right? As much as I hate the 49ers, they're just a better football team, and they're a juggernaut right now. They're a team that everyone's predicting to go to the Super Bowl, and they just look like they're just all around a better football team. And yeah, the Hawks gave me some hope there in the first half, and they had me believing for a few. And that's not the first time they've done that this season. That turnover was huge. Listen, I really like the way Walker ran the ball today. I like the way that DK seemed to play pretty tough today, made some tough catches after being pretty much shut down for the last couple of weeks. We have a lot of holes to fill, and I know the biggest argument between Seahawks fans is going to be about who we take at number 5, understandably. But this free agency and this draft is going to be crucial for the future of the franchise, regardless of who the coach is. We can get into Pete Carroll later, but we absolutely need a center. I don't care if McVay's offense doesn't require a great one. We need one. We absolutely need one. It's been garbage all season, and I'm tired of seeing our center position. We need new linebackers. Cody Barton shouldn't even be on the bus. He should be cut immediately. Absolutely the worst player on the team, in my opinion. I don't even know how he is a starting linebacker on this team. And we need a third wide receiver. And the coaches this offseason or like during training camp, hey, focus on tackling fundamentals. This has been a huge issue all season. I don't know how they never figured this out, but that's been frustrating for me. This season overall, I'm just going to say it was very unexpected, right? I went into the season never having predicted we would have won as much as we did. And I'm happy about that because it gave me some hope, right? It gave me some hope. And I think that's all you really want going into a season is that you want some hope for your franchise to be better than they were. And they were absolutely better than they were. Geno was better than I expected. The Seahawks were better than I expected. The downside to that is like that hope also comes with some negativity, right? It brings in some false sense of security of how your team is actually playing. And the fact that we went 0-4 against the NFC South, pretty bad, right? I mean, those are the things. Like, yeah, we won some games, but we lost some games that we shouldn't have lost, and that kind of puts you in perspective of where you think you're at. And honestly, I was expecting this to be the worst season ever. And there's a lot of things that I can say negative about the season, but I just want to say overall, I'm impressed that we were better than we were. But the thing that's just going to sit with me right now, honestly, is the only thing that I can think of is one playoff win in the last 7 years.
Yeah, which is a problem. Which is a problem. It's
right.
It's a big problem, and we should talk about it. I mean, as you were speaking there, Robbie, the thing that that really struck me as you were speaking is that's my biggest concern. I think is that we're not going to have a serious conversation about what I think we need to talk about. I think when you go 4-13 because the stupid 17th game, bloody NFL. When you go at 4-13, you end up having a conversation about what needs to happen, where what went wrong, what needs to improve, why is this team no good. And I kind of feel like because they won the last 2 games last season, we never had that last season. And then Russell Wilson was dealt, and we kind of had that conversation. And now I kind of feel like because they've won 9 games and then had the doors blown off by the Niners, I don't think we're going to have that conversation again. I think what's going to end up happening is people are going to convince themselves that because they got to the playoffs, they were close, and that with an addition here and an addition there, they can be really good next year. And that's not the kind of conversation I think we need to have. I think we need to treat this as phase 2 of the rebuild. And that means treating it as phase 2 of a rebuild, not year 1 of a rally behind Geno and jolly well go for it next year. But anyway, we've got some bigger picture things to speak about. We've got some super chats coming in as well I want to get to. But Adam, first of all, what was your take on today?
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about how people have reacted to the show in the last couple of weeks and saying that, we should have been more positive, too negative, 2 wins, they got in the playoffs, great. And I think if I had to sum up my feelings about all of it, and I'd kind of love to take this into the off season, is that, we as human beings, we're capable of having more than one emotion. And I think all of us were pleased with the way that the team well over, outplayed expectation. There was discussion that maybe, low amount of wins, but we didn't expect good quarterback play. We got it. And I think everyone was really thrilled. Like, we all loved winning every game. We all loved being 17-16 up or whatever it was today. And so from a short-term standpoint, it was fantastic watching this team play, and they gave us some great nights. But we're capable of having two emotions at the same time. And I think all of us have this feeling that whilst that is great, the team is trying to win a championship. And we've come face to face tonight with a team that might well win a championship. But if they don't, that is the level of a championship winning team. And ultimately, they punched us in the face. So the reason we've been slightly frustrated is that we want to win a championship. And that's what a championship team looks like. And I don't personally think that we're on the right track with the regime we have right now to get there. If people disagree with that, totally fine. My personal view is that if we're going to get to that level, it's going to take a hell of a lot of work. And I think it starts at the top, because that's where I think at the moment it's deficient, and that trickles down.
Yeah, I've got a few thoughts on the game. I want to get the super chats out of the way as well. So thank you, Dan. Really appreciate that. No message, but $20 there. Big thank you to that. Thank you to everybody who is supporting the channel. I've got a few more to get through. 12 Man North says, going to be a fascinating off-season. Excited to hear you all break it all down. Thanks for all the work this off-season. Cheers to 2023, fellas. Yeah, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please do, because it's got some big things coming up this week. I'll be joined by Jim Nagy for an interview ahead of the Senior Bowl, which is coming this week. And I will also be speaking to Jeff Simmons about where the Seahawks go from here as well on Wednesday. So we've got some big things coming up next week, and that will continue deep into the off season. Executed today. I don't know if that username is in relation to the game. Thanks for all your work throughout the season and off season, Rob. Thank you. And thank you for that extremely generous super chat there. I really appreciate that. Jack has got in touch as well. Thank you for your super chat. Take whatever QB is there at 5 or the best defender, even if it is unfortunately a Murphy or a Wilson. Miles Murphy. What do we do? Draft Sage, Rob and Co. Great work, guys. Jack, I promise we will touch on the draft. Stick with us. We will get to that a little bit later on. A couple more, I think, I need to address. I think there's 3 more. Mike says this game was right there to be won, but the coaching staff prevented it. We must move on from Pete Carroll to have any hope. Draft a quarterback. Thank you, Mike, for your super chat and for your comment. And Cisco says, was Cisco the guy who did the thong song, by the way? Thong, 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 thong. Looks a bit different in that picture, though. I just can't see Pete going home tonight thinking, I can't wait to do that all over again next year. Yeah, he had quite the face on at the end of that game. So did John Schneider, incidentally. Cisco, thank you for your comment and for your super chat, and for everybody who is supporting us with super chats tonight. And Jeremy says, thanks, fellas. D'Amico Ryans for head coach 23. Thank you for your super chat. Thank you to everybody who sent those in. Keep them coming in. So my thoughts on the game, first of all, I think we have to accept that Kyle Shanahan is a fantastic coach. That's the first thing I want to say. Because as bad as Seattle's defense is, and bloody hell was bad tonight, and they gave up 505 yards, he's just incredible how he schemes players open. There was an option for the quarterback on most plays. They made it look so easy to get big chunk plays tonight, and always seemed to be moving the football, and there was no answer. And then you acknowledge all of that, and then you realize he's doing it with the last pick in the draft of 2022, a 7th round rookie, and he's got him out there running his system. And you give Brock Purdy some credit. There's a Seahawks fan on Twitter trying to argue with me that Geno Smith handily outplayed Brock Purdy tonight. That's Brock Purdy, who had 4 total touchdowns, 330 yards passing and 17 yards rushing, and didn't turn the ball over. And Geno Smith, who had a crucial fumble and a lousy interception again. And we'll come on to Geno Smith. So I think you've got to give them tremendous credit, because as good as the defense is, the way that Kyle Shanahan coaches that offense is unbelievable. And I have to say, there is a broader point to that from the Seahawks. It really annoys me that we haven't got a coach, and it doesn't even have to be the head coach. We don't have a coordinator either, who's just is not good enough to really create one side of the ball that is anywhere close to effective as Kyle Shanahan's offense is. Because I think the defense runs because of Bosa and because of the talented linebackers and Hufanga and the guys that they've got up front and the massive investment in the defensive line over numerous years. But I think the offense runs because of Kyle. And I know they've got Debo and Ayuk and Kittle and people like that. But I think Kyle Shanahan's system, he made Matt Ryan an MVP. And I really want us to have coaches who can drive one side of the ball perfectly. Pete Carroll hasn't done that for years on defense. He's a culture setter. He's a good leader. And I like Pete Carroll, but he hasn't done that for years. Clint Hurt, I think, how can you not have massive reservations about Clint Hurt after that season? The defense, I don't like this defensive scheme. I don't know about you guys. I know we've talked about it at various points. I don't like this defensive scheme. I think there's evidence. There was a great video on YouTube that somebody else did discussing why nearly all of the Vic Fangio defenses are struggling in the NFL. And I'm not interested in it. Unless you're going to go out and bring in Vic Fangio, I don't really want to run this defense. And I don't want to draft a whole bunch of players to play in this defense and it continue to be crap. I don't like this defensive scheme. And we have played Kyle Shanahan tough for years. We have beaten the Niners for years. And this year, with this defensive scheme, what's our record? 0-3. You know, so I'm not interested in this defensive scheme, and I've got massive reservations about Clint Hurt. And yeah, so that's what I would say about all of that. But before I move on to other points, Robbie, have you got any thoughts on what Adam said or what I've just said there?
No, I mean, Adam, I think your perspective was really well. Like, I mean, you know, we're allowed to have multiple emotions. And I think at the end of the day, we just all remember we're Seahawks fans, right? Like, we all are wanting the same damn thing. And we see it so caught up in just arguing with each other all the time about, you know, everything. You're wrong for this, or you're wrong for that. And we come on here and we're not trying. I mean, I got flamed on, let me rephrase. I have like 20 followers on Twitter, but they find me and they message me anyways. And they don't follow me; they just message me. So I got flamed on Twitter this week. You guys are so damn negative, and I'm just like, well, we're just speaking truth. Like, I mean, we're not coming on trying to be like, you know, Debbie Downers and pissing and moaning about everything. Listen, we want better, and I don't think there's anything wrong with wanting better. And you know, like Adam said, having multiple emotions about it it's okay. You know, and that's why I said I'm really actually, you know, I did not expect to win this game at all. You know, and I just, as I reflect on the season and how I felt going into the season and how I was like, this is just going to be an absolute disaster. I was thinking 3 wins. Maybe I predicted 4. Listen, we won 9. I mean, it's better than I predicted, and so pretty happy with that. So, but I just want to see more progress. You know, I want to see more improvement, and like you said, the defense side of things, it needs a complete overhaul.
It does. And I don't think it is just talent. I think people are making a mistake if they think it's just. I mean, I've seen these arguments on Twitter already. People are sending me messages like, spend the 5th pick and like the 20th pick on defense, and maybe one of the second rounders, and then you'll be good to go. I mean, that sounds great on paper, doesn't it? But I mean, are those players just going to end up being the 2023 version of Boya Mafe? Are they going to, you know, bring in an aging veteran like Bruce Irvin and play him instead of Jalen Carter, for example, or, you know, a safety or whoever, a linebacker you might bring in? You know, are they just going to go back to what they've always seen? Well, not always, but more recently have seemed to do. Benson Mayowa gets lots of snaps and Alton Robinson doesn't, and they say he needs more, and Boya Mafe needs more, but instead Bruce Irvin gets them, etc., etc. So, and look, I hope people, I think most people understand the conversations that we're having, you know, that we just want the Seahawks to be at their very best. And if you come on after a game like that and just say, okay, everything's hunky-dory, you know, let's talk about all the positives. I don't think I think that's a boring conversation. So I think it's a bit of both. It's about acknowledging what Robbie says, which is that I didn't expect them to win 9 wins. You didn't, Robbie. I don't think you did, Adam. They've won 9 games. I think the perspective is that they have one of the weakest strengths of schedule in the division, in the NFL, and perhaps we didn't expect the Rams to be crap and the Cardinals to be crap and the NFC South to be crap and, half the teams they played to be crap. And they didn't expect the rest to get the Chargers playing like crap when they got them, etc. We didn't expect Denver to collapse, and we beat them in the first week. So there's a lot of reasons why they got to 9 wins, other than just the performance of the team. But then, Geno Smith was a lot better for half a season than we expected, and I need to come on to him eventually. But Adam, have you got, before we perhaps move on to a different topic, have you got any thoughts on what we're discussing here?
No, I think we've been consistent all year that the eyes on the prize has always been lifting the Lombardi Trophy in February at some point, not petering out in December and January. And, just random variants. There's loads of teams that basically sit sort of within that 6 to 11 win bracket. That, a toss of the coin there, bounce the ball there, 9 wins can become 6 or 11 quite easily. And, you don't want to be there. That's really the last place you want to be. And unfortunately, this team has spent too long in that bracket. And it's very easy to kid yourself when you're in there that you're not too far away from making the jump into the bracket above, especially when you've got, an incredibly positive head coach and players that all sing from the same hymn sheet. And there's a lot to be said for that. And the culture they've built is really good. But I do feel sometimes that people kid themselves that the Seahawks are in a bracket that they're not. And we laughed for years at the 7 and 9 Jeff Fisher Rams, for example. And obviously we're not that bad, but the team's kind of in the same bracket. Like the talent, if you were doing power rankings and grouping teams, like the Seahawks aren't that far away from that. And all we want to do and all we want to see from our team is to get better. And I don't think we deserve to be sort of castigated for that. We will be, because it'll be seen as negative. But I think we all just want the team to be better and to take the step up. And it's going to be a process, and it's going to be harder than just let's have a good draft.
Yeah. And I think part of getting better is having some honest conversations. And I think that I suspect that they will have those conversations internally. I mean, we'll never hear the results of them, but I think they will have those conversations internally. I think it's also important to have them externally as well. I think within the media and on channels like ours, you have to have some important conversations, and otherwise, things generally drift. I do think there has to be some accountability from external sources as well, and I think that's part of what we do. And I wish there was a bit more of it, frankly. Right, so there was a few things I wanted to get into. I mean, I can't believe. I mean, look, because I anticipated that the Seahawks probably weren't, even at half time. I thought, great, but I'm still not feeling quite that confident. But 25-0 as a run in points. I mean, come on, that is spectacularly bad, frankly. 25-0. The tackling, oh my God, the tackling is bad. The total lack of any kind of resistance on defense. The ill discipline, and I know people are criticizing the refs, but they spelled out the rule during the broadcast there that if you go beyond 2 yards, you are downfield, and they kept freezing it with Damian Lewis more than 2 yards downfield, and I'm thinking, what's he doing? Like, this is just, he hasn't. If he was like a rookie who was playing his first game, I'd understand it, or if this was college football and he was a freshman, I'd understand it, but how can a player who's 3 years into league suddenly out of nowhere be flagged 3 times for that? It didn't make any sense. But I have to come on to Geno Smith, because I think Geno Smith obviously had some good moments in that game. The touchdown to DK Metcalf, he had some nice Geno-y moments in that. But I don't think you can get away from the fact that his fumble was the big point in the game. Because if the Seahawks, even if they kick a field goal there, it's still a close game. It just, the huge momentum shift. I mean, like people say, oh, there's nothing like momentum in football, but that just felt epically momentous, that turnover there. And then the Niners score, and it's virtually game over from that point. He trots back onto the field and lobs a nice, easy, friendly interception. Now, he had 5 interceptions in his final 5 games of the regular season. Let's make that 6 in 6 now, if we include this playoff game. There was a fumble today. There were numerous other near turnovers, or should be turnovers, in the other games. And yet I'm sort of sat there. Actually, I was sat in the studio hosting a radio phone in earlier, and I get a message from Jeff saying, have you seen this? Ian Rappaport's saying that they're going to franchise tag Geno Smith if needs be. And I'm sat there thinking, why is this report exist? Like, I don't like, why is it out being said? Because even if you believe that, why are you putting that out there? Why would the Seahawks volunteer that information now? I mean, if you're saying, okay, Gino, we'll have you next year, even if that means we have to franchise tag you, his people will say, thanks very much. So now the bidding starts at $30 million a year. Because if you won't sign us to anything less, you're just going to tag us anyway. So what you mean? There's no benefit. I mean, that if the Ian Rappaport can only have got that from the Seahawks, and yet, what's the benefit in saying that? Like, if you wanted to try and get him for, like, what if the market, you find out the combine ain't that great for Geno Smith, let's just say, and you could get him for 18 or 20 or 25. Well, you can't now because he'll just say, no, we're not accepting that. Franchise taggers, or let us hit the market. Like, it makes, I didn't understand why that existed. And also, equally, I'm wondering, why is there such a few days ago, Brady Henderson reported an article from, he reported an article on ESPN saying that the Seahawks think that they've got a QB-friendly scheme, and actually they can find alternatives on the cheap. Which then I started thinking, like, is Brady talking to John Schneider and Ian Rappaport talking to Pete Carroll or something here? Like, are they not on the same page? Because this is contradictory information here. And I'm confused by it all. And then the other angle to this, guys, is if you franchise Geno Smith, that's your cap space gone. You'll be minus 1.5 million in the red if you franchise tag him. So if you franchise tag him, you have to extend his contract beyond what the franchise tag to lower the cap hit this year, so that you've actually got some money to spend to fill out your roster. Because right now you've got 36 contracted players for next year. So you are saying, we're going to have you at 30 million, and we will pay you no less than 30 million for the next 2 or 3 years as well, because we need to lower the cap hit. So you're committing to Geno Smith for 30 million a year for at least 2 years, maybe 3, maybe 4. And on top of that, guys, if you lower the cap hit from 30 million this year to keep it as a 30 million average, that means the cap hit next year might be 40 million, 45 million. How are you living with a cap hit of 45 million for Geno Smith based on what he's shown since Germany? None of this makes any sense. None of it makes any sense, guys. Robbie, help me out.
They're not franchising Geno Smith. There, I'll help you out.
Ian Rappaport says they
I don't
are.
care what he said. We don't have the money to. You just said it yourself. It doesn't make any damn sense. It wouldn't make sense financially. They're not going to franchise him. Even Geno said he was going to test the free agent market. I think he knows kind of what's coming, and I think there's a reason why he's been so emotional after the games and the looks he's had. I think there's a reason why he knows this could be his time in Seattle, unless something catastrophic happens. He's not going to get the deal that he wants, and then he has to come back to Seattle for cheaper. But here, I'm going to just touch back to the game a little bit, and I was super frustrated with this fumble, and I know fumbles happen, but in that position at that time, protecting the football is key, right? And so the fact that he didn't was very, very frustrating. But what I had a problem with the most is we came out from the second half and we had a 17-16 lead. We had the football, and it was 3rd and 8, and Geno audibled to a draw play. That lit me on fire, because I'm like, go out there and be the man. Don't audible to a freaking draw play. I don't care what you saw. There's no way that was going to work, right? And so I think for me, those are the kind of things that drive me nuts.
That was playing scared there.
Exactly. And I don't know if that was Pete in his headset saying, run the rock or whatever, but I saw him
the headset switches off. The headset switches off.
He was
audible.
He audibled out of that.
He
made a big deal out of it, and I thought it was terrible. So, yeah, I mean, rest easy. He's not getting franchise tag. If he does, then I mean, kiss the next season over as well, because we don't have any cap space. We can't sign anybody.
Well, that's the thing. To me, you the only reason that you would franchise him is because you're going to sign him to a long-term contract, and you just want to make sure that he's not somewhere else while you have those negotiations. That's the only reason to do it. But the idea of, I mean, let me ask you this question, Adam. Do you think the Seahawks will win a Super Bowl in the next 2 years, paying Geno Smith at least $30 million a year, because that's the minimum that he would get because he's on the franchise tag? That sets the bar the lowest point at 30 million a year because of the franchise tag. Would you be comfortable? Oh, sorry, that's the wrong question. Do you think Seattle will win the Super Bowl with Geno Smith earning that amount of money, and you just invest your draft picks into the defense? Because ultimately, what that Ian Rappaport reports, which is not easy to say, is saying is that is, if you just take his report on face value, that's a plan that somebody has within the Seahawks franchise.
I don't, but I also don't think that the Seahawks would win the Super Bowl if Geno Smith won the Powerball and said, actually, I don't need a salary this year. I'll play for free. Like, he's not a championship winning quarterback. And I don't think this is this great slight on him to say that. You know, the fact that he's managed to do this to his career is incredible. And I hope that this gives him a terrific legacy in the city or wherever he wants to go next. But he's not going to win you a Super Bowl as a quarterback. And so if they want to keep him on as a placeholder because they've drafted someone for this year that they think maybe in 2024 or whatever it is will be the guy, I'm totally fine with that. And yeah, but the idea of a franchise tag from a financial point of view would almost suggest to me that it's almost like a surrender from Pete, really, isn't it? That they're going to maybe cut a couple of older guys to create some space. Geno will be a placeholder. And it's all, I don't know, am I reading this wrong? But it would strike me as a way that it would kind of be a really nice defense, like safety blanket for Pete, because he's basically saying to the owners, look, I'm going to cut a load of old money, have Geno as a placeholder, and then we'll go again in 2024, 25.
Well, I was chatting to somebody and I said to them the point that I've made to you guys about financially, it doesn't make sense unless you're going to extend his contract for multiple years and then you are committed to Geno Smith for many years at the kind of salary that Russell Wilson was earning before he was traded, which is, 30 to 35 million type thing. And if you lower the cap hit this year, then, you could be talking like 40 million, 45 million cap hit in future years, which could be difficult to get out of or could lump you with a load of dead money, which is Seattle's speciality. They always seem to find a way to get some dead money into the equation. And he said, well, it's okay. You can cut certain players to create more. But my counter to that would have been, that's fine. But who are you cutting? Because the players that you cut need to be replaced. You only have 36 players signed. So, okay, you could cut Quandre Diggs as a post-June 1st cut, take on the dead cap hit and say you're going to move on from Quandre Diggs. That's fine. Quandre Diggs doesn't deserve an $18 million cap hit next year anyway. But Quandre Diggs needs to be replaced. If you cut Shelby Harris, he will need to be replaced. If you cut Al Woods, he will need to be replaced. You can go through these options. The players that go, you don't have ready-made players to just step up there and come in. You need to have actual players to come in. So I don't think it works like that. And I was just confused. And look, I've got a bunch of super chats to get to. Really appreciate those guys. So I'm going to come to those as quickly as I can. But I want to read this quote to you because this is what I mean about contradictory quotes, guys. And I think this is really interesting. You've got Ian Rappaport saying, Geno Smith's going to be back whatever happens. But then in the Brady Henderson article that I mentioned earlier, I've got the exact quote here. I've brought it up. This is what it said. The Seahawks, meanwhile, no doubt want to re-sign their Pro Bowl quarterback, but they have an offensive system they believe to be QB friendly. They also believe there are potentially viable alternatives on more affordable contracts should Smith's asking price get too high for their liking. Now, that isn't, in my opinion, as in Brady Henderson, this is what I think they're thinking. This, when he says they believe that they have an offensive system that is QB friendly, they believe there are potentially viable alternatives on more affordable contracts. That's a sourced report. That has come from somebody in the Seahawks who has passed that on. He's relaying what has been said to him. So that's what I don't get. Who is telling Ian Rappaport Geno's back in 2023? And who is telling Brady Henderson, well, if his price goes too high, we'll sign somebody else like Sam Darnold or Drew Lock or Cooper Rush or one of these other guys that are cheaper or maybe draft somebody. It doesn't make any sense. And I've debated this on the blog a little bit. I wrote an article, I think, on Thursday saying, are Pete and John on the same page for this offseason? And then I wrote a counter saying, here's the evidence that they may be on the same page. So I looked at it from both angles. But Robbie, I'm wondering, are they on the same page? Are the people in that building who sort of think, Gino, got to keep him, are going to keep him, not even a question? And then is there a GM thinking, well, actually, I've got to build a roster here and I've got to make this work financially and I've got these picks and I don't agree with you, head coach. And is that going to be an issue? What do you think?
Well, we debated this a little bit last year before the draft too. Like, who's actually in charge? What actually happened in that, sit down meeting that they had with Jody Allen, and then all of a sudden it was like some kind of rumblings came out that Snyder had more say in the draft, and Pete would be more focused on the players. So I mean, it's very possible that it's John making those picks, and his contract actually goes 1 year longer than Pete's does. So maybe there's a reason behind that. I think John's in charge. I mean, honestly, I think he's probably the one making the decisions. I think Pete still has a strong say in the building, though. I don't think it's just John's way or nothing. So I think they try to sit down and probably talk about it. And I think there could be the real puzzle. And I've seen people saying it kind of here in the chat a lot about they may be just saying that. And Pete did say he thinks that they had 2 number ones, and there's a possibility they could think that they could bring back Locke and have him be the guy for the year and still draft a quarterback. I don't know what they're thinking, man. This is going to be a very weird up to the draft kind of see what happens things, and just seeing what people are saying. Like, I mean, I agree. I think Pete's probably the bigger problem in the whole situation, and I think it's just time for him to go. Unfortunately, I've been saying it for a few years now, but I just think it's time for a new regime to come over and take over.
I think we'll get on to sort of Pete's future in a minute. I think with Gino, the only thing I could think of was that maybe the reason that report surfaced today is that perhaps Gino Smith maybe it was worrying him a little bit this week, like, because as you mentioned earlier, he was quite emotional after the last game, maybe thinking it was his last game, and maybe they thought it was affecting him. That he was thinking, I've got to go out and prove something, or I'm a bit worried about what the future holds. And maybe they thought that was just a way to reassure him before the game, was to have Ian Rappaport say, oh, he's going to be back. And I don't know, maybe somebody conveniently goes, hey, Gino, look at this, and throws a phone in his face before the game. But even that seems like, that's very, very speculative. That
they do a lot of this negotiating through the media kind of thing. Yes, they did it a lot with Russ too, and it's really confusing. So it's hard to take it at face value.
It's not so much confusing; it's blatantly obvious when they do it. I mean, and I think that Brady Henderson was a bit of negotiating through the media, like, oh, we can find cheaper options. So if the price goes too high, then yeah. And look, I think Gino's a good quarterback for Seattle as a bridge. I think he could be a decent bridge to a younger quarterback, but tying yourself down to the future and thinking that he's going to lead you to the promised land, I think, is wishful thinking. Adam, have you got? It's a confusing situation. What do you think?
Can we just not do the Gino hater stuff that I've just seen in the comments? Like, no one is a Gino hater. We're Seahawks lovers, fans, and that everything we're doing is through the spectrum of wanting the Seahawks to be better. I was certainly a Gino skeptic before the start of the season, and it's been a wonderful story to watch him play, but no one's a Gino hater, and I think we can do better than that.
Yeah, there is a bit of a cult of look, there was a cult of Russell, and there's a cult of Gino, and there's a cult of Pete, and they do not like you challenging their boy. So anyway, I think we've had a good conversation there about the situation. There's definitely no hate being thrown out there. And I think you do have to question the amount of turnovers that Geno Smith has had. Like, he was brilliant in the first half of the season, but there has been too many turnovers and too many near turnovers. And that has to be considered when you think about the future. Quickly, super chats. Max, thank you. Appreciate the channel, chaps. Love it. Agree with the D analysis, but how do we fix it? We've asked for scheme change. Got it. Doesn't work. What now? That is a very good question. Well, I suppose it's not the obvious answer that a lot of people who follow Seahawks Draft Blog and are in the comments live now, and maybe we would say it, and we can come on to this in a sec, is, well, the head coach has been the consistent feature through this. Maybe it's time for somebody else at the head of the table to try and mold the defense. That is a point that some people would make, and I don't think it would be an entirely unfair point. Right, I've got to try and catch up with some of these super chats because I'm way up on the live chat. This one from Mookel says, thanks for your time and effort all season, chaps. Hoping against hope that the 5th pick is a QB. I want to talk a bit about the 5th pick because I'm still open-minded about the whole thing. I am leaning towards QB, but I just think a conversation about both positions is required, not just. I see so many people saying these quarterbacks aren't good enough, and then I sit there like having, basically driven myself to fall asleep on the sofa numerous nights, watching every single one of these games that they've played. And when somebody else says, they're not good enough, and I'm like, well, I've watched every game they've ever played, and all 4 of them are good enough, and it's hard. Sean says, no way we win a Super Bowl with Geno. Go get Anthony Richardson, the Florida quarterback. Thank you, Sean, for your super chat. Kyle says, just want to say thank you to you guys for all the conversations after the game, and Rob for all the hard work on the blog. At least Bruce Irvin got all that playoff game experience over Maffei. Thanks, Kyle. Thanks for the super chat. Damon, thank you, Damon, for that very generous super chat. Really appreciate that. John Schneider, said it all very his look at the end of the game said it all very disappointed. He looked really pissed off. Pete did as well, to be fair. I honestly believe Jody Allen and John Schneider will have a sit down with Pete and tell him it's time to walk away. I would like to see a new defensive-minded head coach. Rob, I agree. We need a new voice. I'm going to come back. I think there's a couple more super chats, but I'm going to come back to Damon's point next. So stay tuned because we're going to come to that. I just want to make sure I haven't missed anything. I don't think I have. Oh, yeah, no, I have. I'm just so behind on the chat. Right, here we go. This one from Dand393. Hey, Rob, thanks for all the hard work. Any linebackers that interest you in the draft, as watching Barton or Brooks is really tough, especially Barton? I'm a bit no about the draftable linebackers, but I've got a list of free agents that I'll share a bit with you that I was looking at yesterday. There's a couple of options on there who might be, and I look, I think I'm ready for that, for some experience at linebacker. Slacker Hero says, definitely agree that we shouldn't tie the future to Geno and we should draft a QB at 5, but the defense was trash today. Dan has averaged 10.28 yards after the catch per completion as Pete finally lost his touch. That is from Slacker Hero. And I think there might be one more. Adam is nodding his head. I can't find it though. Let me try.
I just say, Umbridge, has he finally lost his touch?
Oh, right. Okay.
I think probably a few years ago, I think we could probably agree on that one. I think I've
done all the super chats. If I've missed any, let me know. But I will come back to Damon's here, where he was asking the question about new voice and stuff like that, and I can bring it up again here. That they will have a sit down with Pete and tell him it's time to walk away. Now, everybody looked really angry and kind of, I can remember when the Seahawks lost to the Falcons a few years ago. I mean, it is quite actually, 2016, that wasn't it? Wow, that was 6 years ago. Time flies. And Pete was, can you remember the meme of Pete? And he was kind of like looking over at Dan Quinn and going, yeah, well done, Dan. You got the win today. And then afterwards, he referred to running into a buzzsaw playing the Falcons. And it's fair. The Falcons were explosive and brilliant that year. But I didn't get any sense of that today. I got the sense of Pete Carroll and John Schneider just thinking, how crap is our defense? Like, how can it be this bad? How can it be as bad as this? Because yes, you're playing a really good Niners team, but you've not laid a finger on them on defense, really. They've not come close to any turnovers. There was not enough pressure on Brock Purdy, the 7th-round rookie. You've not created any trouble for San Francisco on that side of the ball. And Robbie, they are going to have a meeting because they always have a meeting. And Greg Bell was very keen to tell us all that it was a very routine meeting a year ago, which ended up with the defensive coordinator being fired, a whole scheme change on defense, and the quarterback being traded. So we'll see how routine the meeting is this year. There is part of me, Robbie, that wonders whether, I don't know if they'll bluntly say, go on, Pete, it's time to go. But there was a quote from Pete Carroll who was asked a year ago how often he speaks to Jody Allen. And he basically said, I don't speak to her that often. It's John who does most of the communicating with Jody Allen, which I saw that quote. I went back and reread that quote a few days ago. And it made me think, does John have a really close relationship with Jody Allen? Are they tight knit? Would, if they are minded to move on, could they could they maybe set something up here where they go, look, we think it's time to move on, but how do we do this? And if maybe they've been thinking about this, moving forward. And I've just seen one of the live comments and it's just thrown me off. Sorry. Anyway, moving swiftly on. I just wonder, Robbie, whether there still could be some kind of meeting like that. And I think a lot of Seahawks fans are going to be minded to say, run it back and just build and keep going. And if the Seahawks had have carried on the way that they did in that second quarter and made a right fist of it, I'd be tempted to go, yeah, do you know what? I don't think you can change stuff. But when you come out after halftime, when you make your adjustments and it's like, come on, this is when the game's going to... Can you win a game in the first quarter? No. Can you win it in the second quarter? No, but you can bloody lose it in the third and fourth quarter when you have 25 unanswered points. I just wonder whether, internally there'll be a feeling of we can't do it. We've got to have a new voice. We can't keep playing badly on defense year after year after year. It's time for a fresh start. Whether Pete's leaning that way anyway, I don't know. I've wondered whether he is. I still think he'll go away and maybe have a chat about it with his wife or Tater and then make a call. I just think it's still an option, Robbie, and I guess we will find out before the end of next week whether it's going to happen or not.
Yeah, I imagine we'll probably, hear fairly soon. And I think there's a couple of things that go into play here, right? I mean, he almost retired after the 2017 season. There's a lot of chatter about that. And I think the post that you made this week about that tweet that went out there's a GM who's been wanting a new head coach for quite some time. And someone goes, I'm guessing it's a John over Pete kind of scenario. And I think that comes into play. And I think if at this point, we probably should, consider the fact that this could be Pete's very last, his last season. And if he does come back, I think we're going to see much of the same that we're seeing now. And I think most people are ready. And this is not a knock on Pete. I know there's a lot of Pete lovers in the chat right now. They're not saying anything negative about Pete. They just time. The thing that I come back to, we're 1-7 in the playoffs. We've won one game in the last 7 years in the playoffs. It's time to try to mix it up, do something different. As I don't think we're going to get back to a Super Bowl with Pete.
Adam?
Yeah, sorry, I'm a bit conscious about my microphone being too loud and making someone's ear bleed again, so I apologize. And just go to your doctor as soon as you possibly can, because that sounds very unhealthy. Yeah, when it comes to the quarterback thing or Pete, I don't know. I feel like we're just repeating the same thing that we have done kind of all season, really. We've ridden the peaks and troughs of the season from a micro level, but I think on a macro level, we've been pretty consistent from start to finish, really. And my only slight frustration is that and this might seem very harsh to some people, but I tend to feel that we've kind of wasted a year of a few players' peak. I mean, certainly someone like a DK, no, he's still a young player, but if we are about to enter another period of rebuilding, I've always respected that they tried to refuel the jet whilst it's in the sky. But if at some point it's going to take a complete teardown and start again, maybe it would have been for the best if it had happened this year. I guess we won't know that until sort of this cycle of this team expires. But there's part of me that just wonders, what's it all been for, apart from, some great moments, which I'm not going to sniff at because it's been more fun than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, I think it's just, I've said a while that nothing's changed my opinion of that. I thought a fairly, mundane routine win against a crap Jets team and by the skin of your teeth beating the Rams and then getting the doors blown off by the Niners is not anything to change my opinion on. And I just think you're getting to a point now where you've got a massive off season where you're going to have a huge set of picks. And if you're going to launch a new era, it's better off now than sort of Pete Carroll drafting the players and then him going in a year or 2 years. And I just don't want to think short term. If Pete Carroll's got a contract to 2025, and if we're being realistic, if that's it for him, if he is going to be gone in 2025 because he is 72 this year, then restraining everything towards trying to win within that time frame that's not how I want to rebuild this team. You know, it's taken the Niners a long time to get to this point. You know, they've had to draft numerous times in the first round defensive line to get their defense. It might take Seattle a long time to get there as well. And I don't want to feel any pressure of we have to be ready by 2024, otherwise Pete's not going to be able to win his ring. So therefore we've got to think short term, which means extending Geno and drafting this player over this player. And what's the most short term results? I want to be in 7 or 8 years' time. I want to be watching a team that's been really competitive for a number of years and can have a go. Like, you know, when the Chiefs drafted Patrick Mahomes, it felt like they were setting themselves up for 15 years of contending. And I want to set Seattle up for 15 years of contending, not 3. And especially, and what I would call an unlikely 3 years of contending. So that's why I'm thinking it. And I just, part of the issue with Pete is what I was speaking about earlier. He has not been able to bring in the support coaches around him to really elevate a unit that makes you the envy of the league. And that's another reason why, you know, he doesn't produce that sort of mastermind defensive scheming, because we've not seen it for years. He had a great defense, a legendary defense in the first go around. That was down to really, if we're being honest, brilliant drafting and just an incredible talent pool of players that were acquired between 2010 and 2013 to set up one of the possibly the greatest ever defense the NFL's ever seen. Without that, the scheme and everything hasn't been able to compensate for a lack of talent. So I'm ready to see something new. I will own it if it goes wrong. I just think I'm ready to see that. I think the new guy come in and all that. But even then, you know, when they have those conversations, guys, it doesn't just have to be a Pete conversation. Like if Pete has to sit there, what's he going to say? You know, about the way the defense has played. You know, how do you defend Clint Hurt? You know, to Jody Allen, the owner, if she says, "Well, hang on, why was the defense so bad again?" You know, is he just going to say, "Well, we're just not good enough"? You know, the talent's not good enough. Is that a good enough excuse? Or is it going to take a bit more of a convincing answer than that? And what's the direction? You know, is it simply we've got this draft? And sometimes I do think a little bit like the Russell Wilson trade's a bit of a cop out. Like it's, you know, if the Seahawks didn't have the Denver picks, how would we be viewing this offseason? Would we just be viewing the Seahawks as perhaps a bit of a mediocre football team that benefited from a poor strength of schedule without the ammunition to really take a big push forward next year? Are we sort of kidding ourselves that because there's 5 and 19 or 20 and then 2 second-round picks and a third-round pick, and because Geno had half a season, you know, that I don't know. What do you think, Robbie? I think that could be an important meeting again. I think if they have it this week, I think it could be an important meeting. And I do wonder whether Pete's just had enough.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you just said. I think they're going to have that meeting. They do it every year. I think this year is going to be a little bit different. I think we'll find out fairly soon, like you said. And I think we kind of said Pete wouldn't want to announce his retirement if he was going to retire until after the season to kind of, you know, get that, you know, not to make it a distraction for if they do make the playoffs, which we were all saying last night. We might hear by this week if that was the case. So because we all thought the Packers were going to win, but I mean, the reality is I think we'll probably hear, you know, after next week, you know, what's going to happen with because I mean, we'll probably hear what's going to happen with Pete, because if they are going to move on there, if he's going to retire, give us a chance to get ahead of the, you know, the coaching tree and kind of figure out what the next steps are.
Yeah, I think so. I think that I mean, there's obviously a bit of time pressure there with that, but also at the same time, I'd be surprised if you know the Jonathan Gannons are going to rush into a job with Philadelphia still in the playoffs. You know, people like that. So I think there's probably a bit of time. Yeah, I think by the end of the week we'll kind of have an idea as to, you know, if there's no noise by the end of this time next week, then the status quo continues, unless of course they say the meeting's not happening until like a week on Monday. But I don't know why you'd have a meeting a week on Monday. But then Pete's going to have to go away and have a chat about it. But, you know, please, can I just encourage people to stop saying certain things are not going to happen? Because after 8 months of Russell Wilson's not getting traded, stop talking about this. It's never going to happen, and then getting bloody traded. I am sick of hearing Seahawks fans telling us what's not going to happen. We were talking about the possibility of Russell Wilson being traded about 2 months before anybody else was seriously talking about it. And then when there was that Adam Schefter tweet saying he doesn't want to be traded, but there's those 4 teams, there were still fans going, what a nothing tweet, what a nothing report. Come on. Be open-minded about talking points and discussions. With number 5, how are we all feeling about it now? Because I don't know if you saw the videos that I posted this week. I posted something immediately after the national championship game where Jalen Carter had talked about being exhausted embarrassed during the Ohio State game because he was exhausted. And then I went away and found a video of him being questioned about it at a press conference where Georgia reporter said, Kirby Smart wants you to work on your leadership and your conditioning. So what do you think about that? And he's like, oh, yeah, I've got to work on conditioning as a priority. And then later in the press conference, what is your biggest priority before the season starts? To work on my conditioning. That's what Jalen Carter said. And then we all saw how his conditioning was when he played against Ohio State and LSU. It was crap. So that's, when Todd McShay talks about character concerns and whether you want him in the building, I think people immediately lurch towards that must mean he's a bad person. It doesn't have to mean that he's a bad person. It might just mean that he's a massive lazy arse. And if he is a massive lazy arse who gets tired playing 40% of the snaps at Georgia, how is he going to handle playing extra games? Because there's 17 games in a regular season where you ain't drafting someone 5th overall to play 40% of the snaps, are you? You're drafting someone 5th overall to be a game-wrecking dominant force for the vast bulk of the snaps. That's what worries me, Robbie, about Jalen Carter. And I do think he's going to be there at number 5 because of this. And I think you're going to end up with a choice between him, a quarterback, or whether somebody like a Tyree Wilson can test well enough at the combine to make a 6'6", 275-pound frame with a 7-foot wingspan because of his arm length, appealing enough to take him instead of a quarterback or Jalen Carter. That's what it's going to come down to for me.
Yeah, I agree. The more you watch his tape, the more you can see it too. And a lot of people will point out, oh, he gets double teamed a lot or whatever the case might be. But I mean, the reality is he's on a loaded defense already, and he gets gassed pretty quickly. And if he wants to, at least he's admitting like, yeah, hey, at least I need to work on my conditioning. It'd be even worse, I think, a character concern if he's like, conditioning's fine. But I mean, to at least admit it. But I worry about drafting someone that high and having him play two downs and have to come out of the game. Like for me, I would rather have the potential of a franchise quarterback, even if he's a bust. I know people are going to say, well, it's too risky. You just have to, I think at that point you have to take the quarterback. I think that it just makes too much sense. Is that I still feel like it's a luxury pick. And if you can pull your quarterback out of this draft with the 5th pick, who's going to be a franchise staple for the next 10 to 15 years, then you do it.
I think some of the talk about the quarterbacks in the last month has been amongst the stupidest conversations I think I've ever had. There's been everything from the quarterbacks have got bad stats, and then you can highlight, well, so did Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes, and Justin Herbert didn't have a great time at Oregon, and they're really good, and Joe Burrow was dumped by Ohio State. But that doesn't matter. It's too risky drafting a quarterback. Well, look at the recent history. The quarterbacks drafted in the top 10 have been more successful than the defensive linemen drafted in the top 10. Oh, well, you don't need a quarterback. Geno Smith's good enough. And he's a franchise quarterback and he can be for the next 5 years. Well, Geno Smith's 33 this year. Are we saying he's going to be a franchise quarterback for 5 years? Oh, yeah, well, he's got more tread on his tires. Aging still happens. You don't stop aging because you don't play 10 seasons in the NFL before your 38th birthday. You still get old. Trust me, I'm 38 now. I feel very different than when I did when I was 32. I just, okay. And there's the other thing that I wanted to say about this. I don't know if you noticed this, Adam. I'm probably a bit of a saddo and picked up on this myself, and nobody else would have done. But in the UK, the broadcast was on a channel called Sky Sports. And throughout the game, when you have commercial breaks in America, they go back to a studio in the UK. And all the way through the game, they have like this ticker down the side of the screen, which has a series of statistics. And I don't know why they do it, but they have like a set of NFL statistics. And it was listed in like top 10s for sacks in the NFL, top 10 quarterback production, top 10 rushes, all those kind of generic stats. And I looked at it and I thought, I'm just going to write down where all these players are drafted. And I had a look. So of the top 10 leading sackers in the NFL, 2 were top 5 picks. Nick Bosa and Myles Garrett. 2 out of the 10. 4 of the leading sackers in the NFL are first-round picks outside of the top 10 and would have been available either near Seattle's first-round pick, their native pick, or after. And 4 were drafted outside of the first round completely. Some of them, like Alex Highsmith at Pittsburgh, well deep, and Max Crosby, we're talking like day 3. So 4 of the 10 were drafted outside of the first round. And that wasn't even including TJ Watt, who was the NFL's Defensive Player of the Year last year, who was a late first round pick. So of the 10 leading sackers in the NFL last year, a lot of them were not drafted at the top of the draft. Now let's look at the leading top 10 quarterbacks list. Here is where 6 of them were drafted. 5th overall, 10th overall, Patrick Mahomes. 1st overall, 1st overall, 7th overall, 1st overall. So 3 of the top 10 quarterbacks statistically this year were number 1 overall picks, and 6 of them were top 10 picks. The other 4 were second-round picks. And that includes Geno Smith. So, and that list didn't even include Justin Herbert, who was a number 6 pick overall. So when you actually look at who is producing in the NFL, it's quarterbacks taken in the top 10, and with the defensive linemen, it's a mixed bag. You've just got to find those players. You don't have to have a top 5 pick on your defensive line to have a really productive game-wrecking defensive lineman. But the evidence leans towards you will need a quarterback. Now, if you are Kyle Shanahan and you have that defense in San Francisco, it's very different. But guess what? Good luck copying that. It's like saying I'm going to copy the Legion of Boom. It's really tough. I mean, the evidence does point, Robbie, towards drafting a quarterback early being something that if you want to succeed or if you want to try and find someone who will be a success, that's the direction to go.
Yeah, I mean, I've been pretty sold on a quarterback at 5 for some time. You talk about some of the defensive linemen that are later in the draft. I mean, you got me all hyped on Kalijah Kancey out of Pittsburgh. That guy fires me up. He isn't Aaron Donald, but he gets compared to Aaron Donald a lot. And why would you not want someone who has that comparison? I think that's a guy that, he might not, be the biggest guy, but that's a guy that you want on your defensive line. And I think someone like that will go probably in the, 15 to, 22 range. And that's a guy that could end up significantly better than Jalen Carter.
Someone has just said that Trevor Lawrence first overall is bad. And I don't know. I will respond to that comment in the live chat with this. Right.
Is it because he just threw an interception? I think he just threw an interception.
Oh, that must be horrible. It must be a terrible play. Adam, I mean, to me, I think they can get the best of both worlds of this draft class. I think you can draft a quarterback at number 5 and still improve your defense because you will have another first, 2 seconds, and a third. So you kind of like set yourself up at the most important position, and then you can add talent to your defense quite easily.
I think you made a really good point when you said that at some point the Seahawks are going to need to find a quarterback, probably through the draft. Now, let's, for the sake of argument, say they take a defensive lineman with the 5th pick. Geno stays. I think we could probably assume that maybe you add 1 or 2 more wins, maybe a playoff win in there. So next year you're picking 22nd, 23rd, 24th, sake of argument. Well, at that point you have no more bonus picks. So you go into the draft picking 24th and you need a quarterback. And at that point, everyone is probably freaking out because they say, well, we're picking 24th. Where are we going to find a quarterback? And so to reverse engineer it, it strikes me that we're in that position right now, but we also have this gift of the 5th pick that, please God, we never have to have again. So it just seems so counterintuitive to me not to use that on the position of most value, at the most important time. And look, if it works, then obviously it's completely worth it. If it doesn't work, you probably get the chance to do it again, and you have to just keep taking punt after punt after punt on quarterbacks. The worry is that if you end up taking a half decent defensive lineman at fifth, you end up staying in this sort of monotony purgatory period where we need to get out of it. And I think the best way we're going to do that is finding ourselves a new franchise quarterback. And if you're pulling balls out of the FA Cup draw and you want your name to come out more times, have more balls in the bag. And I think that if you have the fifth pick, you give yourself by far a better chance to do that than 23, 24 next year.
Yeah. I mean, and I've seen people commenting in the live chat saying something about Pete being John's boss and that John can't do anything about Pete's future. Well, two things I'd say to that is that meeting had ramifications last year, and there are a lot of people who think that John wrestled some power away from Pete a year ago. So that's one thing to consider. And two, John doesn't have to be the one to fire. I mean, no one's saying he's going to fire Pete Carroll. The point is that if he's in the ear of Jody Allen, who is everybody's boss ultimately, or the Vulcan group, then that would have an impact. Then he would be recommending things that maybe Jody Allen would act upon. That's the point with that. I mean, are you all fellas okay? I'm wary that we've done an hour. There are still a couple of things I want to talk about. I'm wary of your time though. Are you okay?
I'm good, man.
Okay. I mean, on the quarterback thing, and people someone's asked a question now about CJ Stroud potentially not declaring, because he hasn't declared yet. The deadline's Monday, I think, which I would imagine he might well be leaning, or at least having a very difficult conversation with himself about whether to turn pro. And if that doesn't happen, it does make things a little bit trickier for Seattle, because what you have is, take CJ Stroud out of it. I think that at that point, Will Levis would be the number 1 overall pick. Then Houston, what are they going to do? I mean, maybe they would go defense, but then maybe they take another quarterback, Anthony Richardson, Bryce Young. Arizona's going to go defense, but then Indianapolis is going to go quarterback. So at that point, you may be out of the quarterback stakes. I mean, whatever happens, if CJ Stroud doesn't declare, the worst case scenario is you will end up with either Jalen Carter or Will Anderson, or one of the other defensive players. So it's not the end of the world, but it's, from like a couple of weeks ago when we were 3rd overall and having, all sorts of options, to suddenly being restricted to where you might just be left with the best defender, then that is a bit of a disappointing situation, I would say. But look, I can only keep stressing it again, I have watched every game that Will Levis, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, and Anthony Richardson's played in college football, and I think all are worthy of the 5th overall pick. And I constantly see people criticizing Levis and Richardson in particular in the mainstream media, and all I would say is just go and have a look at what Levis did in the Liam Cohen Rams offense a year ago. He was absolutely fantastic. That is the offense that the Seahawks run. Now, I actually would not be disappointed at all if the Seahawks traded up to go and get someone like Will Levis, because he can run. He will know the terminology of your scheme. I think he's got massive upside. And I think he's got the potential to give you a Josh Allen or a Justin Herbert type player. I've interviewed him. I know what kind of a bloke he's like. And I think he's a lot better than people think. And I think people need to get out of this mindset of, well, if you don't throw in 100 touchdowns for Ohio State and a wide open offense, or Washington or Tennessee, or if you're not playing for the juggernaut that is Alabama, then you're no good. If you have to play quarterback for Kentucky in the SEC with a crap O-line and a crap offensive coordinator who couldn't get things going, you are not going to have a ton of success. That's just the reality of the situation. And well, I don't understand. I mean, like, stuff like this. English soccer fan who watches American football believes himself qualified to draft anyone or fire Pete Carroll. When I talk about the cult of Geno, and the cult of Carroll, and the cult of Russell Wilson that's obviously turned into the cult of Geno, there are just so many knobheads out there who don't want to have a serious conversation. They don't. They've got, and do you know what? Do you know what it is actually? It's, you know, fellas, it's that they don't have an argument to make. They don't know. They've not got the mental capacity to sit down and have a proper adult conversation and produce some points that can counter the things that you're saying. All they've got is to point to the fact that you are English, or make comments like that to try and stop you having a conversation that they don't want to hear. That's all it ever is. I've seen it on the blog for years.
I'm not English, and I agree with these statements. Why are you not attacking me on this? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me at all. These guys speak so much truth and knowledge when it comes to American football that you don't even know what the hell you're talking about, dude.
As soon as you talk about things in a non-flattering way all of the time, people become uncomfortable with that, and the only thing they can do is insult you, or try and manipulate the argument. You're English, therefore you don't know what you're talking about, to avoid having to actually address any of the things that you're saying. And we see it through it all the time. We see through it so bad. I mean, come on. I think this is one of the most mature places to talk about Seahawks football. It's not the only one, but I think consistently we have good, strong conversations. And when the going was good earlier in the season, what were we doing? We were absolutely purring over the Seahawks play when they were 6-3. I did a whole video admitting how wrong I was about Geno Smith and how delighted I was that he was playing well. And when the going's good, we talk about it. When there's things to get into, we talk about it. If you can't handle talking about the future of this franchise after 13 years of Pete Carroll, then I don't know why you're on the internet trying to have a conversation with anybody, frankly. Anyway, moving on from that. I mean, I just think, Robbie, for me, I know you've said that you agree with it, Adam. I think if you get a chance to take one of these quarterbacks, and if it is Anthony Richardson, I'm completely fine with that as well. Just bank them. But I also don't know whether Pete Carroll, is Pete Carroll comfortable with that? That's another reason why I think he might walk away, Robbie. If you're saying to him, well, Pete, we've drafted somebody, but that you're not really going to have your hands on him because by the time he's starting and having the peak years, you're going to be gone. You know, you're drafting somebody that is going to sit on the sideline and you're not going to be able to use them. And you're not going to be able to get the best out of them necessarily. Yes, I'm sure Pete would guide them, but Pete's going to be focusing on Geno Smith if he's still here and not having anything to do with developing the next one who's going to benefit another coach. So that dynamic is awkward, isn't it? If John Schneider wants to draft a quarterback, that's another reason why Pete go, you know what? Nah, that's not for me. But then somebody else got in touch with me yesterday and said that he thinks that Pete Carroll's very into drafting a quarterback and he's comfortable with doing that. So I don't know what to think, Robbie, but I do think it is a dynamic that should be considered.
Well, I mean, if he does draft a quarterback and he's okay with that, and maybe he sees the benefit of what happened when they had Russell Wilson under a rookie contract, and then if he sees that maybe, you know, Russ's second year winning the Super Bowl, like if he's planning on sticking around for 3 more years, maybe he sees the benefit in that. I'm not entirely sure. Adam, what do you think?
Yeah, I always remember when I think the Steelers drafted Mason Rudolph in the 2nd or 3rd round, and Roethlisberger was asked, like, look, are you going to help Mason Rudolph develop? And he said, no, why the hell would I do that? Like, he's here to take my job. And I'm not saying Pete Carroll, you know, a new quarterback isn't here to take Pete Carroll's job, but it strikes me that Carroll would have that similar view. If he had Geno Smith signed up already, his view would be, why the hell do I need this guy? I've got Geno for the next 2 years that I'm probably going to be a coach. I would have loved a, you know, defensive lineman or another piece to help me build my championship winning team. So I think that first pick is going to be hugely illustrative as to who has the reins at the moment, because I do think it could be quite as simple as if Pete's in charge, it won't be a quarterback. If John's in charge, it will be. And I think that whole dynamic is going to be absolutely fascinating to see how it plays out through free agency and into the draft.
Got a few free agents I want to ask you about. I just want to throw a few names out and see what you think as we kind of like go into off-season mode, just because people have asked for that. I've also had somebody tweeted me and said that they needed something to listen to with the future in mind to help get over the Niners defeat. And I said that I would do that. And their question was, Can you touch on the top 2 or 3 roster situations the Seahawks need to touch on in the 2023 offseason and draft? So I think he means sort of like positionally or like units that need to be addressed. So Robbie, what are the main, when you look at this roster right now, what do you see as the main priorities?
I mean, I said it at the beginning. I think center, or even just interior line, defensive line, and then linebackers.
Adam?
Yeah, I think they, especially if Jordan Brooks is going to be out, they're going to need another star linebacker. I'm slightly less fussed about center. I think I'm more concerned about the guards, and it's alarming how reliant they are on Metcalf and Lockett at the moment from a receiver standpoint. I really think they need another third wide receiver if you want to be a serious offense. You can't only have 2 wide receivers, especially one that's pushing 30 already.
For me, I think the main priorities are getting a quarterback for the future, and if you can do that at 5, I think you have to do it. And I think you have to add some serious talent to the trenches, and that's just it. And I want them to draft with that in mind, but not feel forced to go in any one direction. So, for example, if center is available and he's the best player in the trenches on the board, then by all means go and take someone like Cedric Van Pran. But if a defensive lineman's the best, go and do that. That's what they did last year, and they had a lot of success. Take talent in the right areas and try and come away with reinforced trenches. But I think also that number 5 pick has to be seen as a bonus. So if you can get to one of the top quarterbacks, I think you have to do that as well. Very interesting tweet from Brock Heward in the last 5 minutes, which I think is a pertinent point, and I'm glad that he's asking it. It says, Seahawks, Pete, and Schneider are going to have to do a deep dive on this defense. Scheme, play caller, talent, direction. This was consistently one of the 5 worst defenses in the league for 18 games. And aside from the QB decision, must be the focal point moving forward. I think that he's hit the nail on the head there, because one, he's also accepting that the QB situation is a talking point. It's not just the defense, but he's also laying it out what needs to be discussed here. It is not simply a talent thing. It is scheme. Is it the right scheme? Have you got the right person running the defense? And what is the direction of this defensive unit and the team? I think that's a really good tweet from Brock Heward there, and I think he addresses that. And I hope that the members of the Seattle media will get into some of those topics as well. If you have any final super chats, get them in now, because we're going to be wrapping up very soon. But people were sort of talking about, well, what linebackers are in the draft, and obviously we're going to talk a lot about the draft and stuff like that. But I want to throw some names your way, and have you got any interest? So there are players who are going to be too expensive, and there are players who are not. Robbie, in terms of defensive talent, do any of these names float your boat? Fletcher Cox, is he too old now?
No, I mean, the guy's like timeless, right? But I mean, he's probably going to be too old for what we're trying to build. I think giving some younger guys the opportunity to play is. But I mean, I guess, let me back up. Are you re-signing Poona Ford or keeping Poona Ford at his contract, or are you cutting him?
I don't think you can keep him because he doesn't fit the scheme.
Yeah. I think Fletcher Cox, I mean, he's 33? He's going to be 33, 34?
Yeah,
How old is he?
About 30. I think about 33.
I mean, some of those defensive line, those big boys on the defensive line can play a couple more years into their 30s. So I mean, I wouldn't hate that.
His PFF grade is crap this year, but
on a loaded Eagles team.
Yeah, he's not got a good PFF grade, but he's also
one of those guys that you bring in. He kind of like you bring him in, and he's got he's got the feel for the team, and people respect him, and he'd be one of the guys that could really
very well.
Rally. Yeah, people would rally around him.
He speaks very well. Adam, he reminds me a lot actually of Jalen Carter. The way that they both play is quite similar, but Jalen Carter's interviews are a smidgen different to Fletcher Cox. Let's just put it that way. What about you, Adam? Daron Payne. I think half the league's going to want Daron Payne if he reaches free agency. But do you think the Seahawks would splash out if they have the cap space? And would you want them to splash out on a defensive lineman like Daron Payne if they're going to do that?
I think and this is an obvious point, but I think that if they're going to be spending money that they could otherwise be using it on players in the future, or a quarterback of the future, for example. I think that money needs to be spent on elite or as close to elite talent as you can get. And if you think Daron Payne is a guy to do that, if you think Fletcher Cox is a guy that can give you 2 years of sort of elite production, like better than Shelby Harris for the sake of argument by a distance, like that for me is what is worth paying for. Otherwise, you may as well save your money and roll it over to a year where you can really make a big push, because it is going to depend on, look, it's hard to see how this team is a year away or, is an off season away from making their big push. So pay a smaller amount of absolute quality that can set you up in 2, 3, 4 years time would be a way I'd prefer to go. Or you say, look, we're going to try and really go for it, and the draft. But that seems a little bit short-sighted to me.
I appreciate that we could be here all night talking about these names, and we'll probably get into some of this later in the year. So I'm just going to run through some others. TJ Edwards is a linebacker at Philadelphia who's had a good season. He's a free agent. Tremaine Edmonds is a free agent at Buffalo, linebacker. Leighton Vander Esch could probably get on the cheap. He's had some injury concerns. Could he do a job for you for a year? Experienced. For me, he's had a good season. PFF grade's pretty good. There's some linebackers to look at. I think Isaiah Wynn as a potential guard, depending on what his market's like. I've always liked him. Garrett Bradbury, former first-round pick, could come in and play as a veteran center. He's got the size that they look for and would fit the scheme, that's for sure, if Minnesota decides to let him walk. Darius Slayton, 4.3 40-yard dash runners, had a very good season for the Giants. Might be pricey. They might not let him get away, but if we're looking for a really good wide receiver 3, he could do that role very quick. Zach Allen and Draymond Jones have never really lived up to the hype, but they do fit the 3-4 defense as a 5 technique. Jermaine Pratt's had a good year for the Bengals as a linebacker who's flying under the radar a little bit. And then you've got other guys like Jesse Bates, be quite expensive at safety if they need one of those. I don't really know why to go down that road again. Dalvin Tomlinson, David Onyemata. Are there any of those names, Robbie, that float your boat?
I mean, a lot of these guys I think are going to be priced out of
probably
out of what we can afford, to be honest with you. I think you're probably going to look at, I mean, I don't have the list of free agents up available, but I think I remember seeing like Kevin Pierre-Louis was going to be a free agent again at linebacker. And I think those are the kind of guys that they're going to target, like a little bit on the cheaper side, guys that they've had experience with, but it could depend on the whole the coaching situation. I mean, it depends on who they bring in at coach. If it's Pete, then that's what I would expect. If Pete's staying, then I'd expect, the Kevin Pierre-Louis types to come in. That's what I would expect. But if it's a whole different coaching staff, who knows what could happen?
I cannot handle the answer at linebacker being Kevin Pierre-Louis again. If that happens, I'm going to cry. I mean, I know I'm a literal cry, tears. I'm not making a glib remark there.
I just think that's what I expect, though. You know what I mean? Like that's what my expectations would be.
I'm ready to see something else. Adam, any names there that you think, go on then, I'll have a bit of that?
No, I think I'm kind of done with we'll have a bit of that mentality in free agency, to be honest. Like I was thinking about, people were so up on Artie Burns. What a canny free agency signing that is. His work with Sean Desai. Don't think he played a game, did he? In the whole season. And I'm quite tired of just throwing money, small or large, at players that aren't really going to be part of your next championship team. So I'd rather fill gaps with young guys than older guys that you have to pay any money to be honest.
Well, we're in that off-season mode now, so we'll see what happens. With the Jaguars are about to lose, which is not going to impact Seattle's draft position. I mean, if people are wondering about that, the game you've got to keep an eye on is the Tampa Bay game. You want to root for Tampa Bay to win, because if Tampa Bay wins, I know you're all going to find it very hard to root against the Dallas Cowboys, but you're going to have to go for it for once. And if Tampa Bay wins, Seattle will have the 19th overall pick, and if Tampa Bay loses, Seattle will have the 20th overall pick. So it's as simple as that. They will be 19 or 20. None of the other playoff games matter. So there we go. I think we've got into some good topics there. I will never enjoy there's just something about the Niners. It's not even, I kind of respect the team and I respect Kyle Shanahan. It's just the fans. They are so annoying and they get carried away. Like the Niners fans that I know are getting so carried away. And whenever they don't do it, they then let themselves up for a huge fall whenever it doesn't work out in the end. And that is quite funny, to be fair, but it is quite annoying when you're living through them getting too excited phase. So there we go. Appreciate everybody for sending in the super chats. We will again be back this week. I am doing an interview with Jim Nagy from the Senior Bowl ahead of that. So tune in for that. Live stream with Jeff Simmons, where we'll talk about a lot of different topics as well coming up. I'm sure the three of us will be back together again soon to chat through things. And certainly if there's anything big that breaks, we'll try and jump on a live stream and flesh it out and talk about it. I want to thank everybody for watching during the season. The numbers this year have been huge compared to previous years. And the super chats have been greatly appreciated. And the support that you keep giving the channel means a great deal to me. SeahawksDraftBlog.com for the latest analysis on everything. I mean, I'm pretty sure that the Seahawks are the only NFL team that has a draft blog. One or two others tried and then couldn't live with the relentless workload. So check out SeahawksDraftBlog.com. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Like the video if you wouldn't mind. And if you could leave a comment, even if you've been chatting in the live chat, if you could leave a comment in the comment section, it all helps. Subscribing is the main important thing. I'd like to again say a very special thank you to Adam and Robbie for joining me. I think, Robbie, you did all but one game during the season. Maybe two. I think you missed two.
I think I missed two. There was 2 weeks in a row I think I missed, yeah.
Adam, you did nearly every game and were regular with us this season. And I really appreciate that as well.
It's been a real pleasure. I've loved being a part of it. Thank you for having me.
And I don't think you can. I think it's I think the two guys have been absolutely fantastic all year with great opinions, and they've just got a way of putting it, and they maybe dilute some of my grumpiness, which is all the more important as well. So thank you to Adam, thank you to Robbie, thank you to you guys. Try and enjoy the rest of your weekend if you can, and we'll be back on it with more draft talk and draft articles in the next few days. Until then, bye for now. See everybody.